Welcome to the TEFL Training Institute podcast, the bite-sized TEFL podcast for teachers, trainers, and managers.
Hi everyone.
Hello everyone.
A few weeks ago we had the moderator from Trinity came over for our Cert TESOL.
And she gave us some feedback and what the teacher gave feedback on the course.
And one of the things that she mentioned was that the teachers complained that they got inconsistent feedback on their lessons. So for example, maybe one trainer would say, oh, you need to do more instruction checking questions, and the next trainer would go, oh, you asked too many instruction checking questions. People got really frustrated, right?
Yeah, they were confused and don't know which person they need to listen to. So the moderator said,
do you think teaching is an art or is it a science?
Mm-hmm.
And it got us thinking about how teaching is kind of more of an art, whereas maybe language is a little bit more of a science. And it got us thinking about some of the differences between being a teacher and being a trainer.
So in our podcast today, we're going to talk about moving from teacher to trainer.
So we've got 3 questions. The first question is,
what are the similarities between teaching and training? And number 2,
what are some of the differences between teaching and training? And finally, what are some of the challenges for new trainers and how can you overcome those challenges?
All right, so Ross, and what are the similarities, in your opinion, in these 2 different roles?
For me, one of the biggest similarities is the importance of the role of being a teacher, of being a trainer, and that if you're that person, then people see you as being the authority in the room. And it's really important to bear in mind how important it is to give people praise. So for example, I can remember when I used to go to a gym every day, and obviously I was terrible at the gym and weightlifting and everything.
Yeah, no.
And so I hardly got any positive comments from the trainer, but I could always remember whenever I got praise from the trainer, what it was that he said. If you're the trainer or a teacher, then people will really appreciate praise and feedback from you.
It's just like, I think the trainer or the teacher, they have more power, and the students or trainees, they perceive this person has a lot of influence. So for example, now I'm doing the MA course with Niall in the UK. When I brought up some ideas or topics like neuromyth.
This is on the online forum, right?
Yeah, about the multiple intelligences and learning styles. And after I posted for 2 days and nobody replied or give any comments. But it's interesting, after my tutor commented on my post, there are quite a few teachers on the same course commenting on my post.
Wow,
it's
so
interesting.
2 days.
And
then after he commented, everyone else followed.
Yeah, you can see like after the tutor doing this, then the other people think, oh, okay, it must be a very valuable point. So I'd like to contribute to this.
That's similar to being a
Powerful,
teacher,
yeah.
right? So what else for you do you think is kind of similar between the 2 roles?
Building relationship with the students and the trainees in the classroom. And if you have really, really good relationship with your learners, for example, you made some mistakes with your spelling, or maybe you forgot something, I think that students are likely to forgive you and just move on. And the same thing, running the same training session to the trainees who we're familiar with, they trust you more. And that the training session went a lot better than doing the same thing to another group of trainees who don't know you very well.
Did you not have an example about a teacher in your school?
Yeah, so we had a group of teachers, and one teacher, her teaching wasn't the best, but she got the great rapport with the students when we observe and also get the feedback from students. So she always spelled the words wrong, and when the students asked her a question on the spot, and she wasn't able to answer it, but no complaint at all. On the other hand, another teacher, really good teacher, fantastic teaching skills, but I don't think she spent any time after the class to know the students and to talk to them. And if she made any mistake, and straight away the second day and got a complaint.
Wow,
yeah,
that's amazing. I remember reading something about this with doctors, and it was research about patients tended to sue doctors that they didn't like. It wasn't doctors that made mistakes. It was all about how much time doctors spent building rapport with their patient.
Okay. And another thing interesting is you need to know your audience. I mean, the audience can be the learners and can be your trainees, right? We're talking about setting up the context for your learners and make sure it's relevant to their life. I think the same thing to the trainees, and make sure what you did in the session is relevant to the trainees, their professional context. So we train them how to teach. So if we make it more relevant, and it's more likely for them to change their behavior when they are teaching in the classroom.
The ultimate goal of any teaching or any training is that people take what they've learned and apply it in their real lives. And the more you know about their real lives, then the easier it's going to be to do that, right? By making all your activities and things relevant. So for example, if you're training kids teachers, you want to make sure that all the activities and things you talk about are related to teaching kids.
Yeah,
or if you're teaching people who are going to be teachers in an airline, then you make sure that all the activities and everything relate to working on an airplane. And
any more similarities?
for me, the single biggest similarity is like the methods and the techniques that you use. And I think for teaching and training, so many of them are the same. All your groupings, elicitations, questioning techniques, all of those things are the same. Do you not have a good quote from Donald Freeman about this?
Yes, I'm often amazed by the number of competent colleagues when they teach us in ways they could never dream of teach language students.
Even though teachers maybe have all these skills, they tend not to use them in the training. And I think the key thing with that is that if you think of all experiential learning and everything, what people remember from your training, it's not what you trained, it's how you trained them. I remember from my first ever teacher training session I did when I was a brand new director of studies, I did something about teacher talk and how to speak less. And how did I present it to them? I gave them a lecture, a presentation about
You
how to
spoke a
learn.
lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was doing the complete opposite. And I think for teacher training, that the key thing is demonstrating all those good techniques and that you get your trainees to reflect on what were the good techniques that you used that they can steal.
Moving from teacher to trainer, and you kind of forgot all the good techniques and skills you used in the classroom. And then you just, I really don't know what to do. But just reflect on what you did in a successful lesson. And I'm sure there are a lot of techniques that can be transferred in the training session.
Yeah, I think it's all about, like, if you think about teaching, good teaching, it's always about making the students the stars of the class, isn't it? And I think it's the same with the training. Get them speaking, get them performing. And the best advice I ever got was, at the end of your training session, your trainees should be more tired than you.
Yeah, I remember you gave me the feedback as well when I first started training. Yeah.
So Tracy, what do you think are some of the differences between teaching and training?
Most of the teachers, and they probably had some kind of online courses or some training programs before they become a teacher. But for most of the teacher trainers, maybe they didn't have any trainer programs before they become a trainer. So maybe for teachers, there are kind of some like models they can follow when they're doing lesson planning, like, PPP or ESA.
Yeah.
And they have some general information about how to start the lesson, have an engaging warmer and a variety of activities, error correction and giving feedback, right? And also for lesson planning, I think mainly we focus on the basic levels if we are talking about Bloom's taxonomy, understanding and remembering. But if you look at the training plan and you are not just trying to ask the trainees to remember all the principles or the rules in terms of techniques in the classrooms, and you want them to know how and why and be able to evaluate in what situation or context they use them.
To be an adequate teacher, you need to be skilled, like you need to be able to do teaching, but you don't necessarily need to know why you're doing what you're doing. Whereas for a trainer, it's not just enough to be skilled, you need to be skilled and aware of why you're using the techniques you're using.
It is the important thing that you mentioned.
That's right. So you've got 4 quadrants. So skilled and unskilled, aware and unaware. The worst is unskilled and unaware. So you don't know what to do and you can't do it.
Yeah.
Or you could be skilled and unaware, which I think is quite common for teachers, right? You can do it, but you don't really know why you're doing it. I often find on diplomas and cert TESOLs, that's the thing that people learn. They could already do it, but now they understand why.
Interesting. That's why in the syllabus or the criteria, it says the trainees should be able to analyzing something. That's why this, if people are doing a higher level certificate, and that's something they need to work on.
Right, which is one of those higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, isn't it? Analyzing. Yep.
Okay.
As I was saying at the beginning, language is kind of more of a science. It's easier to say if a sentence is right or wrong than it is to say that someone's teaching is right or wrong. And I think as a result of that, as a trainer, it's not quite so black and white, cut and dried as it is if you're a teacher to say, no, that's wrong, don't do that. And I think with training, it's a lot more like, what do you think are some of the advantages and disadvantages? And you're kind of hinting and discussing more because, still after hundreds of years of analysing teaching, no one's can really agree 100% on what is good teaching.
Yeah, I think there are more ambiguity in teacher training.
So I guess to add on to that, anyone who's teaching or training, they need to have some knowledge about what they do, the subject matter. I think for teachers, usually that subject matter is language. You need to understand what's right and wrong or what meaning is. But for trainers, you need to have the knowledge about the language. But you also have to have that knowledge about teaching as well.
That's the first thing. Moving from teacher to trainer is the knowing your subject.
So what were some of maybe your challenges as a new...
I remember when I first started, I can spend, a few hours just plan a 1 hour training, and I felt, oh no, it's not good enough. But I would say maybe do it and then reflect on it and then read up your training session plan, because I think it's more effective and efficient. Because the first time when you're doing the training, it won't be perfect. You?
I think for me, understanding what it is that you can transfer from teaching to training, and almost like thinking about it like a Venn diagram, like two circles. What's good teaching? What's good training? And then when do they overlap? And understanding all the great things that you need to demonstrate every time you run a training session. Well, when I was a new trainer, I think I struggled to have realistic expectations of my trainees to finish my diploma. And I think I expected that
everybody to be diploma level.
Yeah, basically after 2.5 days, I thought I could turn everyone into a diploma level teacher. And I was so desperate to train the teachers and pass on all these great ideas I had. But you know what? They weren't relevant to those people.
It's like you are expecting the beginner level students to produce a fluent conversation talking about economy or something.
Yeah, right. So I guess obviously we have that order of acquisition, don't we, for language, that before you can master the third person S, you have to be able to use the present continuous or something. And I guess it's kind of similar for training, isn't it? You've got to be able to give clear instructions, for example, before they might be able to elicit or something.
Yeah.
I also think that we all experience this, right? That sometimes training just doesn't work. Like you give a training session and the people
always
just don't get it, right? Like I'm sure you had this when you were a manager, right? You give a training session on concept checking questions, you get everyone to practice it, and then the next week you go into people's classes and observe nothing changed. And you go like, oh, what happened? And I don't know, I think sometimes that's the trainer's fault, but I think sometimes it's just that training doesn't work for everyone. Like I used to have someone who used to work for me, and they were Chinese teachers, so they were teaching Chinese to foreigners in China, and they would use 90% of the class was in English. And I was trying to, give her this training on how to use Chinese to teach Chinese, and it didn't work. And then I observed her class and gave her feedback, and that didn't work. And eventually I said, okay, you can observe me teach a class. And after that, she's like, oh, now I understand. So I think it's realizing that
training is only the one way to help people develop. It's not the only way.
Exactly.
If it doesn't work for one person or whoever, maybe try something else. So to wrap up, what kind of advice would you like to give the teachers who are moving to trainer?
Have you ever seen the film Glengarry Glen Ross?
And no, I heard the name.
There's a great scene in the film where Alec Baldwin comes in and gives this speech about sales and how to be a salesman.
A, B, C. A always B, B, C closing. Always be closing. Always be closing.
Pretty funny. Anyway, so that's ABC, always be closing. For me, the one for trainers isn't ABC, it's ABD. Always be demonstrating. So whatever you're doing, whenever you're giving training, you should always be demonstrating all those teaching techniques that you've got. And if you're teaching teachers how to do a listening activity, have a listening in your training and make the listening about how to run listening. If you're teaching about using materials, make sure you have materials in your training session. If you're teaching teachers how to use task-based learning, use task-based learning to structure your training session. So always demonstrate, because teachers don't remember what you train, they remember how you train.
ABD. Okay, thanks everyone.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
For more podcasts, videos, and blogs, visit our website www.tefotraininginstitute.com.
If you've got a question or a topic you'd like us to discuss, leave us a comment.
And if you want to keep up to date with our latest content, add us on WeChat at Tefo Training Institute.
And if you enjoyed our podcast, please rate us on iTunes.